Well, we're really looking for young people who've demonstrated that they are impact players. They are people put on this earth to make a difference and to motivate others to move towards a higher goal, a higher mission. They approach things by celebrating what's being done great, but seeing where there can be improvement. They're progressive. They are bold, very adaptive.
When admissions officers are looking at international applicants, they typically look at the academic scores of the students. So if a student is an IB student, we're going to look at your scores in the IB diploma or your IB classes. Same thing with AP exams. But in terms of recommendations, we may ask for some contacts of referees, but we will not necessarily even contact those individuals.
Well, I think the most important thing is that this is really the first gateway to adulthood. This is the first choice that they really should be making on their own, and trusting them, even though as parents we do know our kids well, and maybe advising them regarding other schools they should look at it can be helpful. But at the end of the day, this is really a process where we have to trust them and know that they know best. The application process is it's a human process. We read the applicants and we really can't tell if the application's been peppered too much by maybe outside, whether it's parents or other people, and that's unfortunate because then it loses authenticity. And at the end of the day, we want to know who we're bringing here, not who was packaged and what's going to happen. So I would just say trust your kids. And honestly, most admission offices, especially at CMC, because our students are such take charge, we want the questions coming from the students, not from the parents. We don't mind if the parent has a question and they want to ask as a parent, but we've had parents say things like, I was working on the application and that's just all wrong. This is really the student's process, and they're going to do it right. They're going to do a good job.
Every application is reviewed by at least 2 readers in our office, in most offices for that matter. We get two very, very thorough reads. Each reader gives a recommendation, and then it is brought in front of the committee, the entire admissions committee, where we will, the primary reader on the file will defend that applicant in front of the committee, and then there'll be a vote, it's sort of a democratic vote on whether that student is admitted, not admitted, or waitlisted. You can have up to 3 readers on an application, but basically applications at Trinity go through 3 cycles. You're either read twice and it's clearly that it's clear that you're going to be admitted, or it's clear that you're not going to be admitted, and then there's that group, which is about 30 to 40% of our applicant pool, where it needs it needs thorough review and it needs to be discussed in front of our committee. So the more on the margins you are at an institution, so if your numbers, your SAT scores, your grades look like a majority of the candidates, then you're going to be discussed even more at that institution, because you're going to be considered on the margins and going to committee where you're going to need a full review. So that's really important to know when you're building your school list. Applying to schools that you're clearly going to match up with and get in, ones where they're going to be more of a reach, that you might not stack up, but you want to give it a shot, and then those schools that are sort of 50-50 chances, and those are the ones that you're going to get a more comprehensive read.
6,113 files. Every file is read by at least 2 officers here. As one of the senior officers, I read about 2,000 files in a given year, the majority between January and mid-March. And what really makes the file come alive, after a while we've seen the same GPA scores, classes that students have taken. It really is the stuff the student has control over. It's the essay, what we're learning about the student, it's the short answers. It's who they choose to write their letters of recommendation and to talk about them. And if possible, if a student interviews, having the opportunity of someone affiliated with the college to really get to know them and to add to their file to make it come alive.
I think that schools like Trinity that are looking for a comprehensive approach to an application review, we're looking for two things. And I think the best thing to ask yourselves when you're writing an essay is if you can answer yes to these two questions, then we think that you have a really strong essay that will just, will really make your essay distinctive. And the first question is the topic of my essay important to me? And you should be able to answer yes to that. The second question you need to ask yourself is, am I the only person in the world that could have written this essay? And if you can answer yes to those two questions, then you have a fantastic essay, because you'll have an essay that's not only important to you, but unique to you. And it will be one of many components where you're trying to three-dimensionalize your application during the process. No, not at Trinity, and not at typically at institutions that read applications comprehensively, ones that really give a holistic view to the application, typically don't have minimums or cutoff scores. There are some schools that have recommended cutoffs or recommended minimum scores, and there are some schools, sometimes larger institutions, where they're not having, they don't have the people power to read all of the applications comprehensively. That might have, they might have minimum scores, but at Trinity we don't. What we do is we do review the test score. It is one part of the equation, but it is only one part. And again, getting back to giving a comprehensive read, we want to know where the student's from, how many languages do they speak. Evaluating an SAT score by itself is the same as measuring your shoe size. It tells us absolutely nothing about the candidate, as a student, as a person, or what their potential might be. So you're better off sending your shoe size, to us than just your SAT score. Having said that, if we combine that score, along with knowing your background, your language skills, where you've been at school, your academic record, your counselor recommendations, your essay, if you throw the SAT in there with all of that, it starts to tell, us a little about, about your academic background. So it helps contextualize, but by no means do we have minimum scores and we would throw out an application because of a particular score.
For UBC, the academics is really always going to be one of the most important aspects of the admission decision. So students need to be academically prepared. So for UBC, we're going to be looking at students' IB scores certainly in the very high 20s, low 30s for most of our program as a minimum. So that's going to be probably, I would say, the primary basis of admission for UBC. Certainly, we do have a personal profile on our online application, so students are going to have a chance to tell us about some of the extracurricular activities they're involved in, and we do want them to put that information down, and that information is really important as well. So we'd like to see that.
The IB diploma at CMC, as well as other institutions that I've worked at, is considered to be the most rigorous international standard. And it's, it's got the value, the currency, because schools have to be approved and have to follow processes to do that. So students pursuing that track are always considered to be pursuing the most demanding course load. Not that they have to be doing that to be competitive at CMC, but that's considered to have the highest value.
We view both very equally, in the sense if you're doing the IB, that's all we need to see is your predicted results. So IB stands alone. If students are presenting APs, then they would have to combine that with regular American curriculum. So at the University of Toronto, looking for a competitive GPA, either 2 APs or 2 subject tests, and in addition to SAT or ACT. So that would be our requirement if students are following AP, whereas IB stands alone.
What if it's IB certificates and not the full diploma?
If it's a certificate, then we can use the IB classes in lieu of our AP or subject test requirement.